As a Christian working woman, you have many roles, from your responsibility with family and friends to community and work. How do you connect all that you do with all that you are and still have your faith shine through? It's a challenge, but you are up to it. The She Works for Him podcast is the gathering place to empower Christian working women to live out their calling at work by connecting them to God, resources, and each other through powerful faith stories from other working sisters in Christ. Welcome to She Works for Him.
You've tuned into She Works for Him with your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Nadia Dixon. We are a place where we connect Christian working women to God, resources, and one another. And I know that today is going to be like just what we experience every time is that God connects us to new friends and through them, giving us resources that we maybe can use in our own lives to take us to a new level where maybe that is how we then connect with God. We don't know what God has in store for this conversation, but I'm so grateful for each and every listener that's here along the way with us. And I'm just anticipating what God has to say. So just remember, you can connect with us on sheworksforhim.com. sheworks4him.com. You can also do that on all of our social media platforms. LinkedIn is a great place to hang out with our Christian working women. We often get to know each other a little bit better personally on Facebook and Instagram. And I just am so grateful that you can be our friend in that way where we can stay connected. So remember to do that.
Thank you, Martha. You know, more and more we're becoming aware of an issue that's just rocking our country and our world. And that is the area of human trafficking. And what we do know is that it has become an evil, multi-billion-dollar business trading in people. And there are many impactful rescue organizations on the front lines. But today's guest believes that to fight human trafficking and exploitation, a strategy is needed that includes more than rescue. Today, we visit Portland, Oregon, to have a conversation with Rachel Rose Nelson. Rachel is the executive director of Freedom Business Alliance, and she believes that Christian women in the marketplace have the opportunity to play a key role in helping create safe employment opportunities for survivors of human trafficking and exploitation. Rachel Rose Nelson, welcome to She Works for Him.
Thank you. So excited to be here today.
Well, Rachel, before we get into more of your story, why don't you tell our listeners how or why you became a follower of Jesus?
Yeah, it's a pretty dramatic story in that I became a Christian age 26 after the birth of my second son. I was in the middle of an abusive marriage that caused me to get to the end of myself, the end of my ability to solve that problem and run right into God. And so it was a reluctant conversion, but a dramatic conversion. And I would say that is at the heart of why I feel led to be in the position I am today to help vulnerable women all over the world.
Wow, so good, Rachel. And I know that you now are working all over the world in leadership development. You worked for 20 years as a creative director and a business consultant for small and large companies. Can you tell us, just even back then, how you integrated your faith with your work?
Sure. I mean, I was already in business when I became a Christian. And so I really have had a journey of integrating my faith and my work. I really think in the beginning, I didn't see a lot of integration. Probably the insight came when I encountered Proverbs 31 in the Bible. I think Proverbs 31 Ministries was running a radio spot at that time. It kind of piqued my curiosity. I so I looked it up in the Bible and read about this woman who was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist. You know, I really saw myself in her. And so I think the beginning of that integration came when I just cried out to the Lord, help me gain the wisdom that this woman of noble character had. Help me integrate that. And I knew I would be working at that intersection of faith and business, but it's been a journey of truly integrating those things.
You know, it really is a journey. And I think that's one of the things that our listeners really need to hear. It's not like we're failing. It's like, today, what can I do? Open my eyes, Lord, to that new opportunity and to be more authentic. Because really that's integrating our faith, is just being more authentic about who we really are and not segmenting our lives so much. So such a great reminder for each and every one of us. So you began your focus at California Polytechnic University in graphic communications, and then you went on to complete a Master's of Art in Ministry Leadership. What was the catalyst?
Yeah. Well, there's about a 20-year, gap between that initial degree and then when I went back and studied in seminary. And I would say I was a little bit of a fish out of water as a mother of three, a woman not training to be a pastor, but knowing I was going to be entering the world of business in a ministry capacity. And the catalyst actually was just starting to do a little research on behalf of my teenage sons about local Christian universities. And I stumbled upon George Fox University Seminary and looked at the classes, and I said, I would take these classes if there was no degree. They just sounded so fascinating. And I knew at that point I was doing a writing project, and it just seemed like the right next step to prepare me to speak with authority and from a studied perspective on God's word, God's ways. And I had no intention of going through the ministry leadership track. I entered in spiritual formation. I thought, I'm not a leader. But halfway through that journey, it really opened up. I mean, it was the only track that I had dismissed from the beginning. And then God just made it clear, that is the track I want you on. So I shifted gears in the middle of that seminary experience to focus on leadership.
Wow. So where in that timeline did you start the organization Her Worth International, and why did you start it?
Yeah. First off, I started it while I was in seminary. I do not recommend.
So you are a crazy woman.
Yes, exactly. I do not recommend that to anyone. But I was so on fire to address the issues I was seeing. I had a transformational experience. I went to Haiti in 2012 and spoke to a group of single mothers there who were living in extreme poverty, had resorted to prostitution to feed themselves and their families. And I saw that connection. I had begun working with a local pastor there in Jacmel, Haiti. And I just saw it all so clearly. I have learned God can give a vision. That doesn't mean you need to do it tomorrow. There was a lot of preparation he was getting me ready for. But that was the impetus to starting it, was to create a channel of support and empowerment for that group of women there in Haiti. But I was starting to become aware of the needs of women living in extreme poverty all over the world. So that was the start.
Wow. So Rachel Rose Nelson, I know that there is so much that we're not going to be able to cover in our conversation, because God is I can already see so many facets that we really want to dive into. But when we come back from the break, I really want to talk more about the conversation of human trafficking and how that might affect our listeners and what we can actually do about it. But listeners, if you, along the journey, as we're having a conversation, want to connect with Rachel, I'm going to make sure all of that's in the show notes, how to engage with what God has you doing right now and to learn more. So just go to those show notes and we'll make sure that you get more information. But we're going to be right back in just a moment with Rachel Rose Nelson. We are your co-hosts, Nadia Dixon and Martha Brangenberg.
Did you know that God has a calling on your life? It's true. He's called you to bring Jesus to the world. For some, that may look like a pulpit or a foreign mission field, but for most of us, it looks like a construction site, a cubicle, a hospital, or a classroom. Wherever it is that you work, live, volunteer, and invest, that is your mission field. To learn more about integrating your faith into your work and retirement, check out our books, I Work for Him, She Works for Him, and I Retire for Him, by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with your co-hosts Nadia Dixon and Martha Brangenberg. We are joined today by Rachel Rose Nelson, and I know that this is a topic that a lot of women really want to lean into because it's heart-wrenching, and as a woman, there are things that I think that compel us to the compassion and the level that we need a better understanding, though. And Rachel, I'm so grateful that you're here to share a little bit about how God is using you in that process. But listeners, just remember, the show notes will have some connections, some links to help you with some, just more information along the conversation. So Nadia, why don't you just kind of lead this conversation as we go into this segment?
Sure. Well, we've learned a lot. I have, anyway, from my perspective in business and marketplace, learned a lot about human trafficking. And I see things now that I have not seen before. But once you see something, you can't unsee it. But just in your perspective, Rachel, here we are in 2022. This is an age-old issue. I mean, it's been around forever, but we're just now learning more about it. What would you want our listeners to know about human trafficking, this business in 2022?
Yes. And you're right. It is a business. It's a wide, multinational, organized business trading in people. And a lot of people are not aware of the prevalence. There are over 40 million people caught in trafficking today, which is a staggering statistic. It's happening all over the world, including right here in the United States. It's kind of grown people have grown in awareness, especially associated with some of the headlines in the news about trafficking. It looks different all over the world. Kind of along the lines of what I was sharing, my awareness grew when I saw the particular manifestation of that economic vulnerability among this group in Haiti. But that opened my eyes to see, this is happening all over the world to different women in different ways because of that vulnerability. And so it's something where people will immediately think, okay, let's free these women from this situation physically, not realizing that around the world, the leading factor of vulnerability is economic vulnerability. And that still exists once someone has been set free from their physical captivity. Except now, to make matters worse, they're dealing with post-traumatic stress that will often manifest itself in the workplace, since it is in the workplace that they experience that trauma. They have disrupted relationships with authority and peers. So it presents challenges that have to be addressed.
Wow. And so I know that part of your assignment now is to bring more awareness and opportunities. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Freedom Business Alliance and how you were introduced to that work?
Sure. Well, again, it was through that initial work I was doing in Haiti and my growing awareness that this was part of the human trafficking crisis, and that there were people all over the world, just like me, that God was calling out to create business solutions to combat this problem. And so as soon as I became aware that there was a whole group, right, and it was really at an event where I had heard about it from one of the founders, and I leaned in and kind of stalked her afterwards and said, hey, we need to talk. And I always say, it might be similar for your listeners. They may be leaning in right now saying, how can I get involved in this? And I would encourage people to contact me and reach out and subscribe to our mailing list to get more involved. It was really just a progression from there of the organization understanding or getting more familiar with my business background, and work as a strategist, as a consultant with other businesses. They brought me on just to facilitate strategic conversation. One thing led to the next, and now I'm here as executive director.
So tell us a little bit about what Freedom Business Alliance actually does. I'm kind of grasping that there's a way to help with income as you're pulling people out of trafficking, but tell me what that really means. What does that look like? What is Freedom Business Alliance?
Yeah. Well, we should probably start with what is a freedom business, because most people don't know, right? And a freedom business is one that exists to create employment opportunities for survivors of human trafficking and those at risk of being trafficked. And so these businesses have been purpose-built for that. And they are providing the structures of support, because it really isn't enough to just offer a job. That's a great first start. But because of some of the issues that these survivors are dealing with, and because they haven't maybe received the level of education or vocational training, there are special structures of support that have to be provided. And so what we saw, we got started at it as a conversation coming out of the business as mission movement. And a number of businesses saw they had the same mission to create these jobs. And they started in conversation in 2013, formed the nonprofit in 2015, and convened forums in regions all over the world. But we've grown in our role within the movement to address challenges that these businesses face that no single business can address on its own. So we work kind of as the strategic arm, doing research, training, building awareness, and looking for opportunities to capitalize on market opportunities in sales on behalf of our members.
So if I could just kind of translate a little bit, someone could have just created this, had a passion that says, I see a need and I want to create a business, not even knowing that they maybe necessarily were creating a freedom business. But now you are coming behind them, trying to gather those people together so that they can exponentially work together for the good of those that have been trafficked or been rescued, or to keep them from it. Is that kind of a
that is
fair
exactly
bottom line?
Right. That is exactly right. Yes.
So what if somebody, are there still freedom businesses out there that don't know that they have an alliance? Do you think?
Absolutely. Yes. Because there are people working in the anti-trafficking space, especially, who've seen this issue and start businesses.
Right. So I just want to address that just for a moment, because we are Christian working women helping other Christian working women connect to God, resources, and one another. And this is one of those places that we can very easily do that. All of us have friends working in anti-trafficking in one way or another. They're either, on a social media platform, or they're doing a business. And this is an opportunity for us as listeners to say, hey, there's an alliance to help you do what you're doing for the kingdom in a much bigger way. And so I just why don't you just quick before we go to break, tell people how they can connect either themselves or their friends to your organization?
Yes. So, and it goes beyond. There may be some who have a business in operation doing this, want to start one. Right. It also is as easy as using the power of your purchases to make an impact. Yeah. Most of these businesses are creating apparel, jewelry, handbags, things that women purchase, and you can support them just through your purchases. The place to start would be our website. We have a member directory where you can see them, but be sure to subscribe and you'll receive updates of all the sorts of ways and entry points to get involved in this particular cause.
And that website is
freedombusinessalliance.com.
freedombusinessalliance.com. Listeners, we'll be right back with more from Rachel Rose Nelson right after this break. You're listening to She Works for Him with Nadia Dixon and Martha Brangenberg. We'll be right back.
As women, we like to share our special finds with others. That new little shop we just discovered, or a favorite brand that is having a sale. Well, I have a special find for you. The Awaken Podcast Network is a collection of podcasts gathered onto a digital platform with you in mind. No more searching and wondering if the content is relevant. The work has already been done. Awaken Podcast Network even has smaller collections of podcasts focused on specific topics, including a collection called She Works for Him, dedicated to content for Christian working women. So go ahead, unlock God's purpose for your work, and check out awakenpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Nadia Dixon. I am so excited about this conversation because I know one thing about women, and that is that we can't keep things to ourselves. and we want to help and we want to do our part. We know that our commerce speaks very loud and can also be of great help. And so we are gift givers, we are buyers, we are consumers of things. So right now, I feel like we just really need to address that and how people can help even in that way. And Rachel, you were saying that, there are tons of companies out there that have product that is the result of this these freedom businesses that are created all over the world to help in anti-trafficking. And so, listeners, I just want to let you know that you can call our listener line, and there's a very generous offer to have a giveaway of a piece of jewelry that has been created through a freedom business. But more than that, I want to encourage you to go and do some of your gifting, some of your buying. And Rachel, am I right to say that they can go to your website in order to find those other businesses? Is that right? freedombusinessalliance.com?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So listeners, call our listener line 866-713-9675. 866-713-WORK is the phone number, and you will be entered to win one of those giveaways. But everyone, go to the website, make some purchases. It's that first step in just getting engaged in that way. So more than that, Rachel, how can Christian women in the marketplace play a role in God's redemptive plan for the victims of trafficking?
Yes. Jesus proclaimed his public ministry by citing Isaiah 61, the verse that says he is proclaiming good news to the poor and setting the captives free. And I really believe that when we're talking about the captivity of women experiencing trauma, that it is going to take an army of women to come and lift our sisters out of those situations. It is a unique call that in my position, I see most of these freedom businesses are led by women that God is calling to do this unique work that cannot be done by men because of the sensitive nature of it. And so if there is an inkling of a calling, I encourage everyone to lean into that and pursue that public ministry that Jesus first proclaimed.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rachel. 2 weeks ago, we had a lady that left pastoral ministry as her primary assignment to go into business. And I hear that you have been in business and now you have a primary focus ministering from this. It's an integrated business and faith platform, which I love. I mean, you're showing us that our assignment, God wastes nothing. He takes everything we've ever done within our business world, our ministry world. It's really all one world. It's kingdom, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have a particular life verse that you've lived by through this journey, or one that's speaking to you right now that you can share with our listeners today?
I will just reiterate that verse I just mentioned, Isaiah 61. It's the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners.
So powerful. And you're showing us what that looks like today in 2022 with everything God has brought you through yourself personally, and how your freedom is now leading the way for freedom for other women. So thank you so much for sharing with us today a very vulnerable situation, and just that God is faithful, that he has a redemptive plan, that he can take a mess and make a message out of it. We're so grateful for the work that you're doing, Rachel. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to your audience. So privileged to do so.
You've been listening to She Works for Him with your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Nadia Dixon. We're Christian working women helping other Christian working women to live out their calling at work as she works for Him.
As Christian women, we have many roles, from daughter, sister, friend, wife, and mother to analyst, accountant, executive, or educator. Is it possible to balance our roles at work and home in a way that honors God? The answer is yes, and our new book, She Works for Him, will help show you how. Written to celebrate, encourage, and equip women in the workforce, She Works for Him discusses the diverse experiences of today's Christian working woman. Pick up a copy by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore. You've been listening to the She Works for Him podcast with your hosts, Katherine Gates, Nadia Dixon, and Martha Brangenberg. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube under She Works for Him. And to access any of the resources we mentioned on today's show, see the show notes at sheworksforhim.com. That's sheworks4him.com. This podcast was created to empower you to live out your calling at work so the world knows she works for him.